Alrighty, we should be live. Awesome. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well, and I hope everyone's having a good start to their Shabbat day. Let me share this in the chat so that we have everyone in the stream. Sweet. We'll give people a couple minutes to join. I hope this week has been good for everyone. I hope this week has been a week of Thanksgiving for all the things you always put in your life. I hope work was good. I hope everyone's in good health. For those who have children in school, I hope the kids are doing great in their education and they're avoiding all the pitfalls that the current American administration and education system puts our children through. That they're obviously being the best version of themselves and obviously networking and growing their friend group, because Yahuwah knows how much more we need positive influence around ourselves, especially the children. Before I forget, I would like to start the stream by saying next weekend is our National Couples Day weekend. So if you have not made plans, as I said yesterday when we were in our Friday Bible study, please make time to obviously go and spend time with your significant other. Make time for them, and obviously make time for you guys to enjoy each other's company. If you don't want to do it by yourself, grab a buddy and make it a couples date. Double dating is always fun, especially if you have good company. So do something, whatever it may be, is up to you guys. That's the beautiful thing about free will. We can make decisions. So I just wanted to give a heads up on that. I'll probably do another PSA at the end of the stream, but just so I have it here for everybody on the record. Next weekend is Couples Day. I know if you go by the date, it's the 27th, which is Shabbat, and obviously you can't spend on Shabbat. So do something either Friday, which is the 26th, or Sunday, which is the 28th. Unless you're going to do, some sort of date that doesn't involve money or anything like that, then I guess you can do it on Shabbat after service. There's nothing wrong with that either. Or you can make it a Couples Day weekend and do something every day. Again, I'm not going to tell you not to spend time with your significant other. Either which way, do what you have to do so that you can spend that time, allocate that time to them. So, like I said, I'm going to give this another couple minutes. I just wanted to get that quick PSA out the way and obviously let people join. Today's teaching is called Communications Part 2, which is a little silly given that there's no Communication Part 1 obviously on the channel. But we had a fantastic Bible study discussion yesterday, and in the study last night, we spoke about communication, and we made some very good breakthroughs on what is good and concise communication when it comes to speaking to your significant other and also others in the faith, and obviously those in your family household unit. We have a lot of ground that has to be broken through for us to be better communicators, better active listeners, and just overall just better at our delivery methods when it comes to saying what we have to say in a way that is progressive, and not progressive in the way the mainstream media teaches, where we have to accept everyone's nonsense, but progressive in the sense that the end goal of the dialogue is to move forward. It's to progress forward. And what that progression looks like obviously is different from couple to couple, person to person. But yesterday's chief goal was to have that conversation and obviously engage in that dialogue with you guys. Today's conversation is a continuation of said conversation. And it has to now focus on two separate areas. The first area is, and give me 1 second so I can mute these notifications because it's probably going to show up on the recording. The first area is going to be establishing who you are in a dialogue, which sounds a little funky, but pretty much boils down to when we are talking to our significant others, there are things we're trying to get across. And today I want to hone in on the things of Yahuwah and how we are supposed to better communicate. And I wanted to hone in on this area because of yesterday's dialogue. There seems to be a hang up when it comes to finding some sort of happy medium in being able to stand firm in the faith, but also not come off as an ogre or come off as someone who's trying to evangelize. And then there's also a little bit of a hang up when it comes to being better listeners to react in a positive way rather than be proactive in our defenses towards someone when they say something to us. And Sister Perla made an excellent testimony yesterday in regards to she has moments where we've read a couple of scriptures about how Yahuwah is going to judge every word you say come that day of judgment. And she said I'll be she's going to get judged for it because she has that issue where she listens and reacts more often than not to rebuttal rather than just to absorb and take in. And that takes a lot of maturity to understand that maybe you're that person today, but you're working to be not that person tomorrow when it comes to that particular aspect. But I think a lot of people, unknowingly or knowingly, have that character trait. And we spoke about that at length yesterday, so I'm not going to rehash old conversations. But today I just want to hone in more on the spiritual conversations. During my men's Bible study this week, both on Tuesday and on Wednesday, it became abundantly clear husbands and fathers have a very challenging uphill battle when it comes to this truth. And having that dialogue seems to be one of the friction points. Not necessarily because people are at war with their partner or because the conversion itself is problematic, but rather there is some hesitancy. And in those hesitancy, Shabbat Shalom to you, Jay. Thank you for joining, brother. In that hesitancy, it's causing for confusion and it's making it very difficult to have open dialogue that will help the family become more in accordance with the will of Yahuwah, keeping the commandments, keeping the Moedines, which is the feast days and holidays, and obviously doing what is required of us as disciples of Yahushua HaMashiach. So, with that being said, I'm going to go over some scriptures to you guys, have dialogue, even though it's in teaching format. And hopefully by the end of this teaching / dialogue, we have a very clear understanding of who we are and what we are as communicators when it comes to the things of Yahuwah and the things of the faith, how we can overcome it, address certain pitfalls, and then obviously come out with tools to be successful in future encounters and situations. So, enough yapping, as they say. I would like to start in the book of Yaakov, chapter 1, and I want to read verses 19 and 20 for you guys. And those two verses go as follows. Before I commence reading, the verses were shared in our WhatsApp group, but in case you don't have an access to WhatsApp, I also put the scriptures in the title of the teaching in our description of this video or live stream. So if you want to follow along, all the verses are laid out for you guys to obviously use at your pleasure. Again, we're reading first in the book of Yaakov, or the book of James, for those who don't know the Hebrew, chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. So then, my beloved brothers, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man does not work the righteousness of Elohim. And these two verses in conjunction are used quite a bit for a lot of things. And for the sake of our conversation, it's a continuation of yesterday's dialogue. Many of us have a hard time convincing our partner of the things of Yahuwah because we don't let them speak about what they are seeing, what they are understanding from the truth that you're delivering, what they understand of what's being required of them. There's a term called shotgunning. And no, I'm not referring to the actual firearm, but rather it's a phrase used when people are pretty much back to back to back to back, stuffing someone verbally with statements or accusations or things, and the other person is not allowed to reply within the individual statements or accusations. So by the time the person does have an opportunity to talk, they're about 9 or 10 statements / accusations into it. So the dialogue is so lopsided because the person has to overcome this this verbal mound, for lack of better words. Many of us are guilty of that. A way of looking at this is a lot of us, we get excited, we come into truth, we do the immersion, we wear the seats, we go to Shabbat service, we keep the moeds, we eat clean, we do all the things that are to us easy to implement and obviously practice and be practitioners of. But for others, it's not as easy. So when it comes to our partner, be it the wife or the husband, or our children, if you have that honor and blessing, it is a very difficult dialogue because when the person goes, I don't understand why you're doing that, or I don't want to do that because that's not what I was taught growing up, regardless of what their background or religious upbringing was, we go into this raw state of mind. And I use that, loosely, but we start going into wrath because we're like, why don't you understand? It's so clear. It's so simple. It's so easy. And we start belittling and degrading the other person because they're not at the proficiency that we're at, especially when that dialogue takes place. That's not conductive language use, and it's not a conversation style that's going to allow you to have further communication in that relationship when it comes to the faith. So, I don't use the word because that's bad language, but we have to be, as the scripture we just finished reading, slow to speak, but quick to listen. Because it's easier to reply to someone with understanding, meekness, gentleness, and a little bit of wisdom about what they're seeing, where they're at, versus having this defensive battle where people are just listening to rebuke or rebuttal. And they're not, at that point, you're not having a dialogue, you're having a debate. And the things of Yahuwah are not up for a debate because the word is very clear. Instructions are very clear. And if you're debating with the person about the things of Yahuwah, you have already lost that discussion. It is better at that point to kind of shut it all down, kind of scorch earth style, and start again some other day or some other time. because you have lost that person in that moment. So I'm going to pause here and shift over to the next set of verses. But I hope the point I'm using, the opening verses, makes sense to those who are listening and will be listening in the post-recording. The next place we're going to jump into is the book of Mishle, or Proverbs, for those who don't know the Hebrew, like I mentioned already. And we're going to read chapter 11, and we're going to read verse 12. Again, Mishle, or Proverbs, chapter 11, verse 12. He who lacks heart despises his neighbor, but a man of understanding keeps silent. I'm going to reread the first part because I think that ties in a lot with what I just finished saying back when we were in James or Yaakov. He who lacks heart despises his neighbor. We have often said here in the Hava and Torah, the closest neighbor is your wife, is your husband, because they're the person that sleeps next to you at night, And when the kids leave the house, they're the person that stands by your side. When the world is against you, they're your support system. When mom and dad pass away, that is the order of things. They become the person who loves you the most on earth. So to hate your neighbor, or to be in a position where you have a heart that hates your neighbor, I'll say it like that, is a very strong reaction. And it's a reaction that comes as a consequence of a series of bad communications. And I've said this yesterday. Not setting up a proper line of communication with your partner is what allows Satan to come into your relationship and cause division. Because Satan only works in chaos. And an easy way to have chaos is where there's confusion. And where there's confusion, 99 out of 100 times, is because there's no clear communication. There's no understanding being established. There's no baseline that has been set forth. Therefore, Hasatan can do what he has to do and be unchallenged. In the second half of this verse, and again, this is Mishle, or Proverbs, chapter 11, verse 12, keeping quiet or keeping silent. I've heard it been said many times, and I myself have been there, as they say, where people get more annoyed when you stay quiet because they take that as you shutting down or you removing yourself from the conversation mentally. And that causes a further irritation from the other party, especially if it's a heated encounter or the communication has broken down to now it's that debate that I mentioned earlier. Despite the initial response to it, I encourage you to practice in being able to reserve your tongue. Why? Everyone here has heard it a bazillion times. But what you say in anger is the truth. It's just the truth unfiltered. So you were going to say what you said when you were upset, but in a better package to the person that you said the thing to. And this is where offense comes in. And this is where yesterday I mentioned, but I'll say again for today because it ties in well. People have a very bad human habit of coddling people that we love. So we use soft language. We're very reserved in our words. We step on eggshells to not offend. I apologize. And what that creates, unfortunately, is an atmosphere where you can never say what you actually have to say to your person. Because if you say it the way you need to say it, it's going to cause a fight. So now you have set up an entire system of communication on lies. Because if you have to curb what you say all the time, you have to walk on eggshells all the time, you have to redraft and rethink every single word that you deliver to your partner, you don't trust that person to handle the weight of the words you're going to give them. Therefore, you don't trust them in a small matter. So how are you going to trust them in a large matter? Life decisions, life goals, things with parental applications to it, things with spiritual applications. If you can't even trust them with the words you deliver to them. And I'm being very extreme in the example I'm using, but little things, once they're been compiled, make for very large stacks of paper. A data set is a data set until it's not, because now you have a pattern. And once you have a pattern, that means you have had a collection of small data points. Our relationships are very much so the same. And once you're at that point where you can't even say what you have to say to your partner for fear of offending or fear of hurting or fear of whatever you fear, Hasatan's there. Because he just has to sprinkle in a little extra. Or he just has to allow you to have a bad day. And then that same reserved, careful language that you craft once you're mad or maybe under the influence of something or maybe stressed from work or just tired from the day-to-day toil that we go through is all removed. And then the person gets to see the quote-unquote real you for the first time. But it's not in an environment that's conducive to productive dialogue. It's not an environment where it's going to produce unrighteousness. I'll say it like that. So if you find yourself that you can't communicate with your partner, practice being quiet more and allow the person to say what they have to say and then attack the points that they are saying versus attacking the person. And once you get comfortable enough being quiet, the other person's going to realize that. And they know when you're being quiet, that means you're listening. And because you're listening, they're probably going to stop talking so that a new battleground can be established. A new baseline can be formed. And now you can engage in honest conversation with each other. And then the natural progression of people will go forward. But again, that takes time. And I understand that. So I'm not saying this as, and Shabbat Shalom to you, Sister Elsa. I'm not saying this as something that can be picked up in one night and boom, next day you guys are going to be applying this. But like everything in life, you have to make it a habit. You have to go out of your way to practice these set things so that they become habitual. They become second nature. And obviously the result will be a better version of your communication methods with your partner. So, moving forward, we're going to go to Titus, or Titus, as it is in English. Chapter 3, verse 2. And it goes as follows. Not to slander anyone, not to be quarrelsome, to be gentle, showing all meekness to all men. When we're talking to each other, and this is just a baseline conversation point, try not to offend the other person with ad hominems, or, people call them bad words, like when you call someone, something impolite. Try to avoid that, because now in doing that, you establish a baseline of disrespect. And with disrespect comes pettiness. And with pettiness, unfortunately, comes all types of matters of evil, because now the person knows, well, if you can do it, I can do it. And if you tell me no, you open up Pandora's box. So try not to slander. Try not to be quarrelsome. Not everything deserves an immediate defensive or argumentative response. There will be things that you have to put your foot down. And again, keeping this in the purview of talking about the things that you hold with your partner, there are things that you have to make sure they understand are fundamentally true. Like today's Shabbat. You should not be doing business today. You should not be doing your own pleasure and works today. You should not be, not assembling. You should be in the assembly somewhere doing something for the things of Yahuwah. You have to let the person know that. If they don't understand that, either you need to take time throughout the week before the next Shabbat to explain to them, show them the scripture, read with them, encourage them to read with you. But you can't compromise yourself either. So there are moments where I'm not going to use argumentative, but you have to be assertive and very firm in the stance. But that's different from offending and telling the person, oh, I've told you this. I'll give you an example. Oh, I've told you about my Shabbat guarding piety a bazillion times. Are you an idiot? Can't listen? Now you're offending. Even though, yes, you may have told that person a million times about how you keep your Shabbats. But if you only ever tell the person on Shabbat, you have failed to prepare that person to understand why you're so firm in your belief. You have failed in your communication throughout the week to educate, to translate your principles, your ideals, your reality to that person so that they can one day either join you or be, as they say, pleasant to dwell with. Meaning they're not in the faith, but they're not doing anything to obstruct you in your faith. Either which way. Showing meekness is, and we've had this conversation in other teachings, and Elimelech and Amathia and other teachings have spoken about this. So I'm not going to go into too many details, but showing meekness is not being weak. Showing meekness is choosing not to fight, choosing not to be petty, choosing not to be the person who starts that conversation that as it continues will cause for a fight at the home, fight on the car ride to home or to whatever location you're going to. And then it's going to be the small thing that builds up over time to this big thing. And then we ask ourselves, well, why are you like this? Or why are you acting in such a manner? Well, again, accumulation of small things, small data points, establishes patterns. So tying it all together as a little bow, if the idea is to communicate with your partner the things of Yahuwah and why they're so important and why you follow them, you should look like Yahuwah. And Yahuwah never offends. And Yahuwah is not one to slander. And if you can't look like that, then you have to change the way you engage in dialogue. Your communication has to be constructive with the goal being forward progression. Something I was saying yesterday a lot, and I'll say again today. Forward progression should be the goal of your communication when it comes to the thing of Yahuwah. Not stagnation and not backtracking. It should be forward progression. Let's continue on. We're going to go into the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 4. And it goes as follows. Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor coarse gesturing or joking, which are not fitting, but rather thanksgiving. These are the things that come out of your mouth. This chapter 5 is famous. Everyone knows Ephesians 5 on some level. But this particular verse I took out of there before we hop into some more deeper scripts. Because people think joking, and this is particular here, the language is very, very clear. Rude or crude or coarse joking is not a bad thing. Like, it's okay. I'm a victim myself of making a joke and taking it a little too far. Because, when you hang out with the guys, that's part of the course. But your partner is not the guys, not the boys. Your partner is not your coworkers. There's a certain level of I'm not going to say standard, because it's not like you're talking to the president per se, but there is a certain level of dialogue that are reserved for certain people. But this rude joking, like, oh, that's how we talk to each other, that's all good and dandy until you want to have a serious conversation or you want to have a serious moment with somebody. And they can't have that with you because they're always making these jokes. They're always having this ha-ha little moment, little jab in there. And it's cute when you're both doing it. It's cute when the situation is kumbayage, but it's horrible when that's not the thing at hand. And for a lot of people, they can't switch that on and off button effectively or quick enough in a situation. Now, in conjunction, cursing. And I'm not talking about cursing whereas you put a curse on somebody, but cursing as in foul language. I've already mentioned don't name call your partner, but I encourage you guys to avoid cursing as part of your active dialogue with anybody, but in particular your partner. I can't tell you how disgusting it sounds when I hear people on the internet or on social media and they're calling their significant other, male or female, out of their name. It is so off-putting, and it just sounds wrong. And it makes everyone around those two people feel awkward. Because what do you do in that circumstance? If the person that proclaims to love you can, out of their lips, that earlier that day probably said they love you, can call you the B word or the A word or whatever word you could think of. That's a very interesting development you have there. And I've often said, if you're having a dialogue with somebody and they have to curse at you, that person either has a very poor vocabulary, which if that's the case, read some books, or two, they don't know what else to say. So instead of talking about what's the subject at hand, they're going to attack you. And how they're going to attack you is by using crude language. Either which way, that is unbefitting of us. That is under us. That is for the scum of the earth. That is for people who lack knowledge and understanding. We are not those people. We've never been those people. We should never strive to be those people. And in behaving in such a fashion, we degrade ourselves. And we allow, going back to what I mentioned earlier about the soft language with the cradling, we allow Hasatan to now speak into our ear and add to the fuel that is that fire. If you find yourself making jokes and your partner is always like not really laughing, they're just kind of quiet, or you find yourself calling people out of their name more often than not, have an honest assessment and ask yourself, can I be better in my communication? Because if this is who you are and then you turn around and talk about the things of Yahuwah, no one's going to listen to you. Because despite the saying it's the message, not the messenger, that is a lie. Because the messenger matters just as much. The message and the messenger are of equal importance. And I can talk about that a different day. But there's a reason why we have the names of the people in the books that we read in the Bible. It's not, and some anonymous person said the word of Yahuwah. It's Joshua. It's Amos. It's Malachi. It's Moses. It's Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, and so on and so forth. These people have names. And look at the people I'm talking about. They're not nobodies. They're men of renown. Worldwide, everyone knows these people. We have kids and generations named after these people, just to honor them. So the messenger and the message of our equal value. So you can't use that same foul mouth that you have to go proclaim the beautiful and pure word of God, or of Yahuwah, excuse me. Or if you're a Christian, God, and you're converting over Yahuwah to you. If you find yourself in these circumstances, it's going to go on deaf ears. And the people are going to label you. And if they label you, unfortunately, we have ourselves a very bad situation. Because now, again, circling back to the core of the conversation, talking to your partner, they don't want to hear the things of Yahuwah if this is how you conduct the language with them. What good is it to them? And the honest is none. If, again, that is the manner of view. So, I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to transition over to the second half of the dialogue. So, I was talking more about communication with you guys here, but this half of the teachings now is going to be, or the dialogue, better said, is going to be about you don't have to justify your faith to your partner. So I'm going to make a leap of faith here with you guys. If you're watching this, be it now or in the future, and you have made the mature, logical conclusion that you're going to be a better communicator and you're going to practice your faith to the best of your abilities, you don't have to justify that. Oftentimes, I see people having these moments where they kind of like have to put a case forward to their partner. And I never understood that, because if what you are doing is making you a better version of yourself, it is overall improving your quality of life and making you a better husband or a better wife, better mother, better father, better brother, better sister, son, daughter, friend, coworker. Why do you feel like you have to hide that? Or if you're not hiding it, why do you feel like you have to kind of keep it under wraps and justify when people ask you? And that reflects in our language. I hear a lot of people say, oh, I'm in the truth, but my partner, I still want them to do their own thing and discover Yahuwah. Or, oh, I'm in the truth and I'm letting the other person come in their own way. Or I'm in the truth and I'm not pushing this on anybody else. All that is deflection. All that is you playing the Sweden neutral stance, which is great when there's war going on, but if you're doing the things of Yahuwah, that's not a war. There's no reason for you to have to state a case. And if this person is your significant other, why would you not want them to share with you the blessing that is the word? If they're Christian and they're not actively participating in their faith, it is to their benefit to learn the word. If they're agnostic, wouldn't you want them to be saved? And if they're atheists, I don't know why you married that person, but let's just say that they're atheists because of life. Wouldn't you want them to know the glory of Yahuwah? Because if you're with these people and they're not on the same page as you, how are you going to teach your children if you don't have children? How are you going to develop your family structure if you guys have two different perspectives when it comes to the word? Because most people base their life on morals, and we all morals come from the good book. But if you look at the book in one way different than I, then my value system and my structure systems can be vastly different. Now, we can come to certain points that look alike, sure. But to say we're going to be buddy and buddy, shoulder to shoulder, that is a lie that we are telling ourselves, if that is the case. So I want to read a proverb that I believe describes a lot of people right now. And that proverb is in chapter 18, and it's verse 17. Let me grab that for us. Give 1 second. I apologize. This is a little slow. And the proverb goes like this. The first to state his own case seems right, until another comes and examines him. It's a funny verse on its face, but it speaks a very strong truth. If I ask you, do you believe in Yahuwah? The answer should be yes or no. It should not be a long-winded justification. It should just be simply yes or no. That is concise, clear, progressively moving forward conversation. So now I know how to deal with you. Either you believe in Yahuwah or you don't. So if you say yes, because again, I'm assuming you're saying yes because you're here today with us. The logical question that people typically ask after that is why? And that's not a yes or no. That has some nuance to it. But once you get past the answer of why, you don't have to justify anything beyond the why. So bringing it back to the couples, if your wife says, oh, you believe in this Yahuwah guy, and you say yes, and she says why, and you lay your case as to the why with whatever you want to use as your resources, after that, you don't have to justify the faith. It is not your job at that point to let her or him know, what do you believe and why? And if the answer is different from your answer, you need to find out how to get it so that the answers are the same. Because you have to be a sar d'chad. Because that's what marriage is, to be one flesh, one accord. I'm not saying you have to be the same in every single conviction, but you have to be the same on all the tenets. And what do I mean by tenets? If anyone's ever gone to college here in America and you've taken world religion classes or you've taken world history, there are things that you see throughout history that are what's called fundamental truths. Tenets is another way of saying that. If you are an active member in a Havan Torah, we have some tenets. Some of those tenets are the true names. We use Yahusha, Yahuwah. Another tenet is we believe the Son is 100% divinity, 0% man. So he's not a demigod like Zeus or Hercules. We believe that you have to keep the commandments of Moses. And also believe in the good news that starts in Matthew. We do believe in using both halves of the book. So from Genesis to 2 Chronicles, and then from Matthew all the way to Revelation. That is a tenet. We do believe in a 24-hour Shabbat. So from Saturday sun up to Sunday sun up, that is our Shabbat, period. So those are just some of our tenets, and I can keep going, but you can't argue those things. Those are fundamental truths. Because if you were to compromise on that, you and I are no longer the same in our membership to Havan Torah. And every group has their tenets. So I say that to say, if you and your partner have different tenets and you're not communicating that, you are fundamentally not in one accord. Fundamentally. And if your foundation is weak or porous because there's holes in it, your relationship is not going to be strong because there's always going to be that thing of contention. And anyone who's ever seen friends or even been in a relationship where people have different ideologies, they know how much tension that creates, especially when it comes to the children, especially when it comes to the holiday times, especially when it comes to anything that revolves or involves the separate families. No one ever wants to look like the bad guy, but at the same time, you shouldn't have to bend over backwards or justify your stance. You follow the things of Yahuwah based on the conviction that you have and on what is said in the book. If the person has issue with that, then you need to have issue with the person, not them have issue with your faith. You don't have to justify it. And I hope I make more sense as I go through these 5 extra verses I have prepared. But I just wanted to lay that out because I find a lot of people having to justify their faith. And there's like no reason for that. You are a believer and a child of Yahuwah. You're a B'nai Yahusha. You don't have to justify it. So, going into the latter half and the verses I prepared for that, let's read in Romania, or the book of Romans, going back to trying to use the Hebrew names for these people. We're going to read chapter 14. We're going to read verses 18 and 19. Again, the book of Romans, or Romania, chapter 14, verses 18 and 19. For he who is serving Messiah in these matters is well-pleasing to Elohim and approved by men. So then, let us pursue the matters of shalom and the matters for building up one another. So, a couple things here. If you if you serve Yahushua, that's the Messiah, the one and only. Again, you are keeping the commands. And I'm going to just state the two obvious ones just to keep the conversation on the lighter side. Loving Yahuwah all your soul, might, and being, and loving your neighbor as yourself. For on these two, the entire Torah balances on. But if you're going to serve Yahuwah all your soul, mind, and being, that means you're keeping all the commands to the best of your abilities consistently, day in, day out. And if you love your neighbor as yourself, you're going to want that for the next person, because then that makes them a better person, and you're serving the better version of this said person. And they're going to want to serve you because you're the better version of yourself. So if you're serving each other, the byproduct is an amazing environment of people, two people or multiple people, doing the things of Yahuwah and receiving the blessing of doing the things of Yahuwah, not the curses for living like the world. So why would you not be approved? Who does not want to be blessed? Who even being wicked would see a man and his righteousness and call him wrong? I don't know how many people have been in that position where people have told you, oh, you're a very religious person. What are they really saying by that? When they say you're a very religious person, oh, you actually follow the book. Or, you actually keep the commandments. That's pretty cool. They're telling you that they're not doing that. They don't live a life to that standard, that criteria. So they are commending that you are, because they don't do it. Be it either because they don't want to or they lack the ability. Either which way, if you're doing the things of Yahuwah, once again, tying back to what I said earlier, you don't have to justify it to the partner. You have to show. You have to instruct. You have to have open communication, letting the person know the hows and whys. Because if you're doing the things of Yahuwah and you're getting blessed, why would that person who's your partner not want you to either continue in receiving blessings? That's just a human brain being greedy. Or want some of that of themselves. Like, okay, this person is getting better and better and better, and I'm here. Okay, let me find out about this Yahuwah guy. Like, what are you doing that's different than God or Jehovah or Hashem? Like, what are you necessarily doing that's so much better than? And in those moments that they reach out because they're trying to see how they can get a little bit of that, build that person up. Don't gatekeep. Don't use poor communication. Show them in the word why you do what you do. So if you wear tzitzit, show them that. You eat clean, show them that. You keep the Shabbat, show them that. You keep the Moeds and the high feast, show them that. How you conduct and dialogue with your children, like if you want to use Deuteronomy 6 as your standard, show them that. So that the person both can see, because they're seeing your walk, they're seeing your faith, they're seeing how you're moving, and the confirmation is the word. It's not you, how can I say it? It's not you justifying why you do what you do to them. It's just you speaking into their life the answer to any question they may have, but answering in a way that's inviting, constructive, and again, progressing the needle forward. It's not justification. It's not being in a courtroom and defending your client. In this case, yourself, but I'm just using the courtroom analogy. And that's where a lot of us are at. Those who have unbelieving partners or partners that are still in a transitionary period within their own faith, not necessarily moving into ours. So, with that being said, we have to start understanding that if we're serving the master of the universe, we will look like someone that is desirable. It's not a if, it's not a when, it's you will look like that person. And people will notice that because people are keen to look at patterns. If you're always doing the righteous thing, people are going to call you righteous. If you're always doing things that are not necessarily the most righteous, they're going to call you unrighteous. It's very, very easy in that regard. And the easiest way to establish righteousness is in our conduct and how we communicate, especially when it comes to our household, starting with our partner. So let's go to the next verse, because again, we have to always have multiple witnesses when we're talking about things of this nature, because I'm not just telling you something. I'm trying to hopefully show you something so that if you leave today, you are a better person today after this dialogue than you were going into it. So again, Corinthians Aleph, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14. But the natural man does not receive the matters of the Ruach of Elohim, for they are foolish to him. He is unable to know them because they are spiritually discerned. I plucked this verse and put it in this dialogue for two reasons. One, we need to stop having deep conversations with people who have no biblical foundation. And two, we need to study. Many of us are believers, but can't give you a verse. Many of us are believers, but when their partner asks them a question about the book, they can't answer it. That breeds insecurity. And I'm not talking about like as an insecure person, but rather, how can I follow this said Elohim that you follow if you don't even know what you follow? That's not the most confidence-inspiring situation. So I say that to say this to you. If you've never done the due diligence of reading the Torah at the bare minimum, please take the time, read it with your wife or your husband. Take that time. If you need help, I can give you a reading schedule. You can read the entire Torah if you do 3 chapters a day in about 6 weeks. That's only 2 months. And you still have time to spare. And if you're really due diligent, I've seen people read the entire first 5 books in a month. That's a lot of reading, but I've seen it. So it's one of those things where there is time to do said things. There is a path forward in our communication that can be improved if we have more knowledge and we have a better foundation. But if you're not there yet, don't talk about spiritual things with the person who has nothing to do with Yahuwah yet, or trying to learn things with Yahuwah but they're not there, because whatever you tell them is going to be ill-informed or lacking so much context that to them it's going to be Hebrew gibberish. Oh, that's just, he's Jewish, he's Messianic, I don't know. It's not Christian. I know that. That's going to be their response. So instead of receiving the things of Yahuwah, they're going to dismiss them. And that's the last thing we want. Because then that leads to, oh, why do you keep the Shabbat? Now you got to go back to justifying. And like I said, to start the second half of this teaching, you shouldn't have to justify your faith. Because you should be doing the things of the faith, keeping the tenets, being in the scripts, communicating what's in said scripts, and teaching, both by showing the word and keeping it. So your works. But I know many of us are not there yet, and I'm encouraging you to get there because it would make everything else in your life easier. And all I want is for you to have a life that has a little bit less struggle and a lot more blessing. The next place I want to go to is Pt.2, or 2 Timothy, chapter 3, verse 16. Again, we're going to read Pt.2, or 2 Timothy, chapter 3, verse 16. And let me get a sip of my water. 1 second. All scripture, as breathed out by Elohim and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for setting straight, and for instruction in righteousness. Again, communication. I asked this question of the men on Wednesday. When's the last time you read the scripture with your wife? When's the last time you read scriptures at all? Some of the brothers were very honest. Some brothers were super honest, and that was awesome. I commend all of you guys. And majority of them read the scriptures by themselves quite often. But very few of them, unfortunately, have actually read the scripture with their significant other. And when we got into that discussion, many of them were very honest in that, certain things in communication can be better. And they all, because they're all smart men, were able to identify, okay, maybe if I incorporate more of the scripture stuff, I can have a more honest, even flow conversation with my partner about the things of Yahuwah so that we can do more things that I know Yahuwah has in my life. And that was beautiful to see that, truthfully. One, because it's always hard to get men to sit in one spot to discuss issues. But two, for them to recognize the issue, have an immediate solution path forward, and want to apply that, which is the most important thing, is amazing to both witness and be a participant in. Using the correct pronouns, I myself have had to go the long way, journey-wise, of making sure that my wife understands where I am as a person, both in faith and in our marriage. And many of nights we've had conversations, some pleasant, some unpleasant. But I have made sure to stay consistent and using the scripture, because if she's going to argue with me, she already knows that my point of emphasis is always going to be the word. So if she has beef with what I'm saying, it's not me. Now, she may give me attitude or get upset. That's human nature. But the source of the conversation is not Fernando or Baruch saying something. It's me reading the word of Yahuwah and trying to apply it into my life in the best way that I can at my knowledge level and skill set at that time. Once you get to that point, that's when you can start saying, well, Yahuwah wins my battles and battles for me. Because you're not even arguing with the person no more. But if you're not at that point, it's hard to have that dialogue because your wife or your husband lacks the fundamentals. You can't have a conversation about the serious things in life with a 5-year-old because they lack the fundamentals. So I want us to not justify our faith, but In the pursuit of being the better version of yourself and being the imitators of Yahusha that we're called to be, I'm asking you also in that to sit down, educate your partner, do the due diligence required. Especially if you're a husband, you need to teach your wife. She has no business asking a rabbi or a pastor or a spiritual mentor the things of Yahuwah first. If she wants a confirmation or a second witness, that's a different story. But her first primary contact should be you. She should have confidence in the answer you provide her. Women is the same. Your children will ask you the things of Yahuwah. They shouldn't have to go to other sisters or other men to get the answer that you should be able to provide them. Now, again, like I said, if they want second and third witnesses, sure, everything needs to be validated and confirmed. But they should have the faith and confidence that their mother is going to give them an answer that is sufficient for the cause of the faith. And be confident in relaying that information, not be ashamed, because they know their mother has done the due diligence. All this is part of good, strong, progressive communication and application, but communication first, because that's the part of today's conversation. We're coming to an end here. And I want to go back to the book of Proverbs. And where I want to read in Mishle, Proverbs, Mishle, is chapter 27. And we're going to read verses 5 and 6. This is digging a little bit deeper. Open reproof is better than hidden love. The wounds of a loved one are true, but the kisses of an enemy are profuse. I have said in the last 2 weeks about this coddling thing, but I didn't want to give the scriptures yet because I wanted to make sure my delivery to you guys was concise. I wanted to apply what I'm teaching you to myself. These two verses in chapter 27 of Mishle are exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of lying to you and using love as the filter to excuse the lying, I'd rather tell you the truth. I'd rather tell you exactly how I feel with the exact language without causing offense in the sense of disrespecting, but exactly how I feel in the exact words that have to be said. Then lie to your face. Because I do not want people to make a habit of white lies. And this is very slow an American thing, but a small lie and a big lie have the same thing in common. They're both lies. And unfortunately, this is not a situation where in a previous teaching I put together for you guys about the lesser of two evils, because there is a difference between the two things. This is a situation of being a coward and being honest. Because you only give white lies because you're scared to hurt the other person. You're scared to make the other person feel lesser based on something that's going on. Going back to the opening half of the second half of this teaching, if you have to do a white lie about the things of Yahuwah, you're both lying to the person and making a mockery of Yahuwah. If you have to lie about what you're doing, you're not doing the things that ought to be done in the open. You do them in secret. You're living this life backwards. You're making this harder for yourself. And the natural conversation point I want to bring up, and this is why I say these two references at the end of this teaching. If you find yourself having to work really hard to do the things of Yahuwah, work very hard to explain and communicate the things of Yahuwah, first, figure out if you're doing a good job of doing the things of Yahuwah and talking about the things of Yahuwah. But after a while, and you know you have proof and confirmation that you're speaking things of Yahuwah correctly and you're doing things of Yahuwah correctly, but the partner you're with is giving you a hard time still, teach them about it. But if after teaching them, they still give you a hard time, I would like you to understand perhaps the way forward is not with said person. Yahuwah is very clear. Mother versus daughter, son versus husband, children versus parents, wife versus husband. This truth will make it very uncomfortable if your foundation was set on sand. And if you have years and years and years and years of very poor dialogue that has been accumulated. So now here you are with a clean slate, a new person, new wine sack, trying to speak the truth, trying to speak better. Speak the words of Yahuwah into your person's life. And they're denying you every step of the way, putting up a resistance every step of the way, regardless of the effort you put in, regardless of the improvements you do, regardless of the works performed. The truth of the matter is you're holding on to something that has no business being with you anymore. You are now a new thing. Now, do I believe that, the one time the person says, no, that's it, leave them and call it a day? No, obviously not. That would be silly. But we all, once we're being honest and have this true communication, we all know where someone stands with something. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand if someone's for you or against you once all the cards are on the table and all the conditions have been met. The fear of man and the fear of Yahuwah are not one and the same. The fear of man leads you to ruin and sin. The fear of Yahuwah is the beginning of knowledge and understanding. I encourage you to lean on the fear of Yahuwah, not the fear of man. The last place I want to go to, same book, Mishle, Proverbs. But I want to go to chapter 19. And I want to read verse 11 as our closing verse for today's discussion. A man's discretion makes him patient, and his adoring is to pass over a transgression. And I want to end on this verse for this. In communication, things are going to happen. In life, things are going to happen. I need us to work at being better versions of us. What do I mean by that? If you're 30 years old, you had 29 years before you became 30, which makes sense, obviously. That's math. But you wouldn't judge the you of 10 years ago, so 20-year-old version of you, on the same rubric you would 30-year-old version of you, because there's a 10-year gap of life that 20-year-old version does not have. And the same can be applied, keep me moving the tally forward. If you came into faith today, and it takes your partner 5 years to come into faith from today, you, in that process, cannot lack patience with that person, because it took you, whenever how old you are now, to come to faith. I say that to say this. Effective communication is also knowing when to give compliments, when to give praise, when to give a hodu or praise, a thank you. Not to compare people to animals, because that's not what I'm wanting to do, but I'm going to give an analogy that's applicable to anyone who's ever owned a pet. We work very hard. I have a full-blown German Shepherd in my home. we work very hard in training and house breaking so that he's a very suitable pet to live with. But in the beginning, it was very difficult to walk him. It was very difficult to engage in certain activities. It was very difficult to have certain people over because he was all over the place. That's the truth. But then one day, over a series of corrections and reproofs and instruction, he stopped doing certain things. He started acting better, started doing better. We're not that different. It's not going to happen overnight. But if we keep doing something and we're consistently doing it and it's on good premises, with good faith and good intentions, eventually either the person is going to fall into place or the person is going to politely tell you, hey, I see what you're doing. I appreciate the patience, but it's not for me. Either which way, it is an amicable ending to a chapter. And you have to be able to be patient and use correct dialogue and use discernment to get there and make the decision that's needed at the end of that chapter. Be it for you or against you, but you have done everything as a believer to get that point across and to make sure the works that you are performing are not ill spoken of. So the kind of summarize today's discussion. We should refrain from using certain verbiage, certain language, certain communication methods that are of the world. We should encourage each other to speak better to our partners, use more consistent language. We should be more in the Word, studying the things of Yahuwah, applying the things of Yahuwah, and doing what we have to do so that we can be better believers in the faith without compromising ourselves or being ashamed of being believers. All that is going on, justifying your faith is unnecessary if you're doing the right thing. And more importantly, there's no need to justify if you're talking to your partner, because they should see the life you're living through your works. And when they ask you the hard questions, you should be studied and approved to explain to them what you're doing and how you're doing it. So, with that being said, I hope today was a fruitful dialogue. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave it in the YouTube comments or in the WhatsApp group, or you can reach out to us via email. I hope you have a really good Shabbat. I hope this week was a good one to you. Like I said at the start, I hope the weekend is a restful one. Shabbat's not over. It'll be over tomorrow when the sun comes up. Spend some time with your loved ones. Do what you have to do. If you have not done your offerings and your prayers, the Eastern Gate is open today. Please engage in the activity you need to do. And once again, just to repeat myself, next weekend is Couples Day. So please take that time and communicate with your partner and let them know you want to spend some time with them and take them out somewhere nice. With that, Havan Torah loves you. I hope you have a great rest of your day.